What did Tyr see in the Lake of Nine that made him break his oath? Beneath Midgard's autumn fjords, a shadow older than Asgard stirs. Olympus ascends. Asgard's gold hall gleams, Jotunheim's mountains loom. The Lake of Nine reflects a cosmos until the void beneath whispers. The binding of Fenrir was the lie that saved them all. Edicts carved in Urd's roots promised, until the void beneath throne of immortal whispers kings. A sanctuary for fallen warriors, a homeland for the giants. The Lake of Nine mirrored these dreams until Tyr drowned his oath in its depths. Not Fenrir's jaws, but a nameless hunger gnawed at the world's bones. What if the wolf was the bait? What if the chains binding him were hooks to drag a shadow deeper into the abyss? Asgard's hymns never spoke of this. The lake's black tide guards a rot older than Yggdrasil, held by one god's silence. A justice unspoken, a crown of frozen regret. The cell walls of Asgard echoed with chains colder than Niflheim. Tyr's silence was no betrayal, it was a vault. Odin's crimes bled through the halls, stolen prophecies, razored truths, wars waged under false stars. A god of justice, shackled for refusing to play the executioner. What kind of king chains a man for refusing to kill? Odin's shadow wore Tyr's face during Ragnarok's final hours. The wolf's snarl drowned in a lie, while Tyr's true hand flesh and bone pressed a name into the earth. Not Fenrir, never Fenrir. Beneath the lake's glassy skin, a hunger older than the well of Erd sleeps. Tyr's severed palm, that hollowed relic, is no trophy. It is a key missing its lock, a cipher for a prison built before the Aesir learned to lie. They call him the god who lost his hand. The truth festers deeper. He lost his hand to bury a beast whose breath could rot Yggdrasil's roots. The lake's stillness is not water. It is a wound sutured by sacrifice, a debt paid in silence. How many gods would trade their honor to save their realm? Tyr traded his very self to save it from a horror he alone could see. The frost on his crown is not a crown, it is a shroud. Asgard's halls glowed with stolen starlight. Odin's hunger for knowledge carved voids in his body, while Mimir's well-mapped futures in ink older than Yggdrasil. Tyr walked their shadows, a king who had seen gods become wolves and wolves become gods. The binding of Fenrir was no mere act of wear, it was a veil. As the serpentine beast writhed, Tyr's blade plunged not into loyalty, but into the hollow where an older evil slept. Fenrir's snarl shook the nine realms, yet the true horror remained nameless, buried beneath Lake of Nine's black mirror. Why would a god of justice betray his kin? Because some wars cannot be won. Mimir saw the fracture, a thing that fed on broken oaths, its form woven from the fabric of fate itself. Tyr's severed hand was not a sacrifice, it was a key, turned in a lock no mortal eye could find. Odin's ravens circled, screaming of endings. The Allfather knew, yet let the lie stand, for knowledge without power is a sword without a hilt. Tyr's name now echoes as warning, not wonder. His halls are silent, the lake is still, but beneath its depths something remembers every oath ever broken, and it is hungry. The Fimbulwinter's first snow fell as Tyr's blade met his own hand. Odin's whispers had shaped the lie, bind Fenrir and justice would endure. But the wolf's snarling thrash was only a shadow, a storm to drown the true ritual's whispers beneath the Lake of Nine. 3 years of frost were no accident. Ragnarok's engines had been primed by a god who knew its gates must stay sealed. Tyr's sacrifice carved a cage not for Fenrir, but for the thing that gnawed at Yggdrasil's roots, the old hunger that dreams in broken oaths. As Asgard's champions fought to tighten Fenrir's chains, Tyr's blood pooled in the lake's black heart. Each winter wind carried a verse of the hymn that bound the abyssal rot. The wolf's howl was a drumbeat, the god's triumph a dirge. Did Fenrir ever know he was the bait, or that his prison's chains were only raised so another's could be driven deeper? The ice thickens. The lake's stillness is a held breath, and the thing beneath no longer waits for oaths, it remembers them. Odin saw the end in his spear's tip. Tyr saw it in the water's eye. The cold is no longer just winter's, it is a hand clawing upward. But the ruin is later than that. The snarling chain around Fenrir's throat was a lie etched in Aesir blood, faint to veil the ancient chokehold on the Lake of Nine's abyss. Tyr's oath did not break for a wolf's maw, but for something older than the god's first breath. The cold you feel it is not a hand. It is a throat unclenching. Beneath that throat the Lake of Nine swirled with stolen time. Tyr's blade never met Fenrir's snarl. The wolf was a shadow, a stage prop for what lurked in the lake's blackened core. A nameless void thorn, older than the Pythos, had burrowed into Midgard's bones. Hope and rot shared the same jar, he knew this. He drank the poison to save the cup. Tyr's hand did not sever, it unraveled. A braid of wards, a key forged in his own sinew, knelt in the mud as the lake roared. The gods called it sacrifice, it was betrayal. He drowned his kin's trust to chain the thing that gnawed at the edges of creation. The ritual bled the sky dry, stars dimmed. The waters thickened with the screams of what he buried, the last to witness, a girl with ash in her hair, clutching a shard of the Pythos. She watched the lake seal itself with Tyr's breath as mortar. His name became a myth, his hand a legend. The void thorn sleeps still, dreaming in the dark. What wakes when the lake's ice cracks? Not Fenrir, never Fenrir. The wolf was a lie to make the truth bearable. The girl's shard glows faintly. It may be the only thing sharp enough to cut what sleeps beneath. Tyr's oath was not to justice, it was to silence. A god's final act and the world's first wound. The lake of Nine breathes in stillness. Mimir's head floating in ash mutters its curse. Asterisk, I see all, but no one listens. Asterisk, beneath its black waves, Tyr's true chains rust. The god of justice did not die binding Fenrir, died burying a rot older than Yggdrasil's roots. What sleeps there gnaws at time itself. Mimir foresaw its wakefulness, a future where gods and giants drowned in a tide of unmaking. So Tyr drove his sword into the earth, not to cage a wolf, but to pin a shadow that had no name. The Pythos of Pandora holds both plague and balm. Tyr's wound was the Bama sacrifice to keep the lid sealed. Hope, they called it. A lie told to the void. No hero's death masked a ritual. No ceremonial hand fed the lake. Only a god who became the lock, his silence the key. The Norns weave this truth in whispers. Justice is not a virtue, it is a debt. And debts demand payment. The water shudders. Mimir's voice cracks. The lake waits. What if the void beneath knows it is bound? What if it is already dreaming its way free? The world's first wound never healed. It only learned to bleed quietly. Tyr did not sever his own hand to bind a wolf. He drowned a shadow older than Yggdrasil in the Lake of Nine. Odin, ever the weaver, let the lie stand. Fenrir's curse became the world's distraction. Mimir, whose head saw the fracture in time, whispered of a hunger that even frost giants feared. Atreus, marked by blood and prophecy, walks a path Faye glimpsed in her final breath. She knew the price, her life, a keystone in the seal. The lake's stillness is no peace, it is a breath held too long. Tyr, freed as Ragnarok's fire consumed the old gods, found not victory but a deeper silence. The named are not heroes, they are tally marks on a tomb. What stirs beneath the lake now has forgotten its name. It only remembers the weight of chains, and how easily they rust. Beneath the weight of oaths unspoken, the blades of chaos fuse to Kratos' flesh, a god's punishment, a father's warning. Brock and Sindris' Leviathan axe, its haft carved with frostbound grief, was never meant to slay giants. It was forged to crack stone where ancient things sleep. The Lake of Nine's runestones do not speak of Fenrir's jaws, they whisper of a nameless void, sealed by Tyr's hand. What price a realm's balance? A god's limb, a hero's legacy. No, the true cost was etched in silence. Tyr's blade, broken in the act of binding, became the first chain. His oath, the first lie. Fenrir's curse was a storm brewed in the wrong sky. The real horror stirred deeper, older its breath rotting the lake's bedrock. Even now the runes fray, the axe's edge trembles, and in the cracks between words something stirs. It knows the blades. It knows the weight of a god's sacrifice, but does it know the name of what it is? The water waits, the chains corrode. And the silence at last begins to scream. The Lake of Nine does not remember names. Its stillness is a ledger of truths too heavy to speak aloud. Tyr bound his own shadow to contain what no lie could mask, a hunger older than the Aesir, older than frost or starlight. The gods called it Fenrir. The water knows better. To cage a primordial force, a god must become the lie. Tyr's oath was not broken. It was unmade thread by thread until justice itself fractured. He traded his name, his hand, his place among the judged and judges. The cost. A truth that curdles the tongue. Some wars are fought not with swords but silence. The binding of Fenrir was a parable, a distraction carved from necessity. While the gods watched the wolf's snarling jaws, Tyr drove a shard of Yggdrasil's root into the lake bed, splitting a void sealed since before time's first wound. The chains you see are not for Fenrir. They are for the thing that slumbers beneath the ice patient, uncounted and unborn by any god's will. What is honesty worth when the world demands a lie to survive? Tyr's sacrifice is the answer. A god of justice became the greatest deceiver to keep a primordial nightmare buried. The lake's waters do not weep, they hold their breath. And in that pause, the universe balances. The lake's breath holds. What primordial horror did Tyr chain beneath its depths? Mimir's head whispers, I see all, but no to one listens. Fenrir's myth was a Leah distraction from the void Tyr sealed with silence.